How's it going? This is Charlie with Creekside Angling here in Issaquah, and today we're going to do a little sculpin fly using the new Fish Skulls Sculpin Helmets. It's these little guys right here. It's going to be an articulated fly, also using these Fish Skull articulated shanks. And the hook you need is a number 2 Gamakatsu B10S. That one hook fits well over these articulated shanks. So start your hook in the vise. And we're using a Renzetti Traveler vise, really nice rotary vise from Renzetti. Sells for about $1.95 here in the shop. So start your thread just behind the eye of the hook, leave a little space where you're going to make the head of that tail section of your fly. Advance the thread all the way back just behind the point, kind of right above the barb, clip off the excess. Now first thing we're going to do, add a little bit of tail. I'm just using some barred olive variant rabbit strip. Got this from Hairline. They have some really great colors in rabbit strips. Measure that on the shank, so about a shank's length of rabbit is sticking out once you tie it down. I'm going to start about 1/8 of an inch behind the eye and wrap my rabbit back. Now notice that I'm wrapping with the hide facing up, because when this pattern is completed, the hook point is going to be up instead of the other way around that you'd make a normal fly. The reason we do this pattern hook point up is because it's designed to ride right along the bottom above the rocks. And that way the hook point doesn't scrape against the rocks and snag on stuff. You get a more snagless pattern that in the hook won't dull as easily. So I've fastened that rabbit strip down, and next thing I'm going to do is grab a little bit of olive crosscut rabbit here. I'm just going to cut off a little bit of this end piece, because they always give you a little bit of crappy rabbit on the end there. I'm going to tie in my olive crosscut and make the body out of this crosscut rabbit. Tie it in right behind the point of the hook, and we're just gonna wrap it up the hook shank. Before I do that, I'm gonna add a little bit of super glue to the hook shank, and that's just gonna secure everything down, make sure it doesn't come unraveled when the fly gets wet. It's gonna make a much more durable fly, a fly that's gonna last long, catch you a bunch of fish. So now I'm gonna start wrapping, and just make sure as I wrap I slightly overlap with this rabbit strip, but not too much as to add unnecessary bulk to the fly. Wrapping really nice and tight, almost kind of stretching out that hide a little bit. Once I get to that point, leave a little space behind the hook eye and tie off your rabbit. Hang on to it and do a few wraps around, clip off the excess, and hold all the fibers back and just wrap over it a little bit. Now that's going to be kind of the belly of the fly, this lighter colored olive rabbit. And at this point, I'm going to actually flip the hook shank over, put it back in the vise. And actually, I should have showed you this. One of the neat things about the Renzetti vise is I don't have to pull it out of the vise to do that. I can just flip the vise over. That's the beauty of a rotary vise. Now I'm tying this fly as if these materials are going to be the top of the fly, actually, the back of this sculpin. What I'm going to do here is add a couple of these barred grizzly mini marabou feathers to make little sort of back for this fly. Strip off a little bit of that feather and tie it in on the top, but sort of facing at an angle towards me, just slightly off center on the top. And I'm going to take a second feather, do the exact same thing, strip off a tiny bit. I'm going to tie it on the exact opposite side, again on the top of the fly, but just sort of angled off center a bit. Wrap those guys in, clip off the butts of those feathers. Now my final step to complete the back half of this fly is to add some barred rubber legs. These are grizzly barred crazy legs in an olive color. You can get these from Hairline as well. We carry them here in the shop in many different color combinations. I'm going to tie these in at the center and make crisscross wraps over them to fasten them down. I'm going to make a few crisscross wraps, and then I'm going to stretch them back towards the rear of the fly and tie them in just like that. Just wrap over it. Make a few wraps over just to complete the sort of head of this back section of the fly. Make sure all the materials are secured down nice and tight. And then I'm going to whip finish. Cut my thread. And you want to make sure that you put some glue on this section before you go ahead. And if you're tying a bunch of these, I would tie these back tail sections first. You know, tie a dozen of them or so. It's going to speed up the tying process rather than tying each one individually. That way you can allow them all to dry before you start tying your next one. I'm just adding a little head cement. And the back portion of my fly is now complete. Okay, go. Alright, so we're tying again a Fish Skulls Sculpin fly with the new Fish Skulls Sculpin helmets. I've already tied the back half of the fly. I've just trimmed the rubber legs short so that they fall just short of the tail. And that's just going to hang out down here for a second. And we're going to use a 35mm Fish Skulls articulated shank. You can get them in the shop here. They're really good for a lot of applications like tying intruders and articulated flies. One of the things I really like about them is that the hook that you use can go straight onto the shank. You don't need to add any extra wire or doing any crazy tying steps. It just hooks right into here. I'll show you how that works right now. So again, this lighter section is going to be the belly of our fly. It's going to be facing down as the sculpin swims through the water. So I'm going to make sure when I put my articulated shank on, I've got this bottom part facing down. And all I'm going to do is hang onto it and clip it on just like that. You see how it swings nice and freely? It's going to make a great wiggly kind of broken back action. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place my fly into the vise like so, and it sits there. The shanks are really easy to tie on. Start my thread, leave a little space behind the head. Remember, we're going to add that sculpin helmet at the very end of this fly. Now I'm just going to wrap with thread to close this articulated shank up. Now, my hook is permanently joined to the shank. I don't have to add any fire line or make any kind of crazy stinger setup. It's all set up for you. And I've used these shanks. They come in 20mm, 35mm, and 50mm length. I've been using them to tie some really great articulated intruder patterns for steelhead. So they have a lot of uses beyond just tying streamers for trout. They can make some really neat looking saltwater streamer flies as well. So next step, I'm going to add some more crosscut rabbit. Wrap it just the same way I did on the last part of the fly. So prepare that rabbit, just cut it at an angle, rip off some of that fur so you can get less bulk when you tie it on. I'm going to wrap that corner of the rabbit strip down onto the hook shank. Advance my thread up just behind the eye. Again, I'm going to add some glue for durability. It's just Zap-A-Gap. I'm going to palmer that rabbit strip up the hook shank, slightly overlapping, pulling it tight. Notice that articulated shank stays really well in the vise. It doesn't rotate or bend or anything like that. Really great shanks to tie on. This is a great product from Fly Man Fishing Company. So I'm going to leave a little room to add that sculpin helmet. Tie off my rabbit, clip it, just cover that excess really quick, and cut. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more of this mini grizzly marabou. I've already prepared this feather by stripping off some of the bottom pieces. Kind of that frizzy marabou at the bottom, don't need that. And again, I'm going to tie these on top of the hook shank, slightly off center. One's going to be facing me, one's going to be facing away from me. That's going to help build up the back of this sculpin fly and give it kind of a more three-dimensional type of shape. Trim the butt sections here. And I'm going to add some more of those grizzly barred crazy legs. Tie them in at the center once again. And stretch them over the back. Just to secure everything down. Make sure they're coming off the sides of that fly. I'm going to trim these just so they extend kind of maybe 1 1/4 inches back, just to about the junction of the articulated shank and the hook, the back hook. So next thing I'm going to do, I'll flip this vise over. Really like that rotary action, makes it real easy to tie all around a fly. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of this red angel hair to make sort of a gill flash. Adds a little bit of sparkle to the fly, catches the fish's eye, makes it look like it's wounded, gives the fish kind of a target. take this stuff, tie it in right at the center. I'm just going to fold this other half over. Use my thumb, roll my thumb back and forth across to spread it out all across the bottom of that fly. And once I've tied it in, I'm going to trim it short. So it's tied in now. I'm just going to trim it. Nice. Flip your fly back over. We're almost done here. Last thing I'm going to add is a little bit of olive deer hair. So I'm going to grab a piece of deer hair, cut it right down to the hide. Get rid of some of that under fur, useless stuff. Just clogs up your fly. Throw it in the hair stacker really quick just to level the tips. And this deer hair is going to create a little bit of like a pectoral fin effect, and it's also going to create sort of a hydraulic block that's going to create more disturbance in the water when the fly moves through the water. Help those materials move and wiggle. So I'm going to size that deer hair so it goes about halfway down that articulated shank. And just wrap it down nice and tight. Probably about 10 wraps is going to do it. Really wrap it tight. Just make sure you don't break your thread. You want to flare that deer hair. And once it's wrapped down, I'm going to trim all these butts short. Just going to wrap over there. That'll create a good base for me to glue my sculpin helmet to. Now, just whip finish right at the head. And the last step is just attaching that sculpin head. Now, sculpin helmets are made to just slip right on the front of the fly, just like so. So I'm just going to slip it on there and make sure everything fits okay. Looks good to me. Last thing I'll do, grab my Zap-A-Gap, put a little bit on that thread. Make sure you put this on straight because you only get one shot at it. Just put it on there, hold it in place for a few seconds. That's glued in. I like to take some red thread really quick, just add a little bit of a, crap, it's not working. Add a little bit of a thread dam on the front of the fly. And that's just going to help hold it in place along with the glue. done, your whip finish, cut your thread. And that's the completed fly. That's your fish skulls articulated sculpin. You can see that tail wags and wiggles. It'll look real nice to a big hungry brown trout. Yakima rainbow.